Hello, I'm Gil Zilkha. Welcome to my channel. This is my series entitled Essential Classical Music, where we look at the best recordings of the major classical music works. This video is taken from my larger video entitled Best Recordings of Orchestral Works, where I look at basically all orchestral music that is not including the symphonies or the concertos. So if you like this video, I hope you'll take the time to view that one as well. Just know that it is divided into chapters, so you don't have to watch the entire thing at one sitting. You can just very easily click on whichever work that you're curious about. So I hope you enjoy it. Now for something not that different, almost a peer, really a peer of Strauss, we have Stravinsky. The Russian composer who really was really broke down barriers in music. He was sort of unknown before he premiered his 3 ballets in Paris, right around 1913. The Diaghilev ballets that he wrote for Diaghilev that were all premiered in Paris. And I'm going to start with his most famous work, the Rite of Spring. Although I'm also going to mention Petrushka because they're often coupled together. So I'll be recommending mostly recordings that pair the two of them together. The Rite of Spring. The Rite of Spring is, or as they say in French, le Sacre du printemps. A lot of people think this is the greatest work of the 20th century, and in terms of being groundbreaking as well as just really powerful, that's hard to argue with. It's not, it's very stark for audiences back then. It was very startling. It caused a riot amongst the crowd when they first heard it, like literally did. They were throwing things at the orchestra. They were so incensed. But it's a masterwork that has held sway. I mean, it was just a couple of decades later that Disney used it in their movie Fantasia. So it's definitely it has its staying power. And then Petrushka is this story about these 3 puppets, and it's a very colorful. In many ways a more whimsical piece, but also very, very dramatic. So my first choice for that coupling comes from a digital recording, 1980 to 1981, and this is with Antal Dorati and the Detroit Symphony. Dorati was an excellent Stravinsky conductor. First of all, the recording quality is fantastic. Really great depth to the sound. It's really powerful with when you hear these percussive rhythms and the orchestral sounds. It's you want a demonstration disc, and that's what we get here. It's a very robust, dramatic, powerful interpretation, wonderfully paced, and then the Petrushka as well. So you can't go wrong with this disc. Really, his biggest competition comes from himself. In 1959, you had this recording with the Minneapolis Symphony with Mercury Living Presence. Again, fantastic sound quality, very vibrant and clear. In this recording, he's a little bit more on the aggressive side, I would say. In fact, there are some that criticize this as being, too barbaric. I mean, what do you expect from this music? But, you have others who say, well, this is the way I've always wanted to hear it. And that's what we get from Dorati. So really exciting as well. An excellent compliment to the Detroit recording. Now, we have to mention, I'm going to go back a little old to a much older recording now. The guy who premiered both of these ballets, and including that infamous performance that ended in the riot, Pierre Monteux. This is with the Boston Symphony. So excellent virtuosity. And then Monteux, obviously he knew these ballets very well. And one of his gifts was a gift for spontaneity, a feeling of spontaneity, and that's really essential in these works. To hear the Rite of Spring done not just with clarity, but also something, an interpretation that kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat, and that's what you get from Monteux. It's not going to bowl you over with the sound quality. The Rite was recorded in 1951. Petrushka was from 1959, so that's definitely a better sound quality. But it's the interpretation that, for me, really tells the story of these works about as well as anybody can. Now, another famous version of both of these comes from Leonard Bernstein with the New York Philharmonic. Very well recorded. This was back in 1958, and then the Petrushka was 1969. Bernstein's interpretation, again, we know this from Bernstein. He could never be straight-laced. He tends to milk things a bit. So the sort of the creepy sonorities, for example, in the Rite of Spring, he really digs into those. It's a little bit slower in some sections. He's not as aggressive as like Dorati, for example, but it's very powerful, and the New York Philharmonic is on top of their game. This is a legendary coupling, and for good reason. Well, I should say especially the Rite is a legendary recording. When we didn't have a lot of Rite of Spring recordings at the time. Very exciting, very powerful. Bernstein wields his magic, so definitely one to seek out. Now, another one that you should also seek out this is from 1969. This is Pierre Boulez. And this is with the Cleveland Orchestra, and then Petrushka comes with the New York Philharmonic a couple of years later. Boulez, the power of the Boulez interpretation is in it feels a little held back in a way. He's sort of the opposite of Bernstein, and he's not trying to milk it at all, but it's a very steady interpretation. And we're going to see in the composer's own interpretation that can be very powerful. This sort of relentlessness to it. He doesn't stop to smell the flowers at all. And there's a cumulative effect in that by the time you get to the end of the Rite of Spring, for example, really brings home the power of the piece. The playing is fantastic. Boulez always was great at getting excellent virtuosity and clarity from his orchestra, and the sound is excellent as well. So definitely a version worth seeking out. Now, another kind of more vintage version, and this is just the Rite of Spring, not Petrushka, is from Igor Markevich. Very powerful, very dramatic, very brusque. Kind of rough sounding and literally rough sounding. The recording quality is a little bit more on the rough side, and maybe a little bit less brilliant compared to, like, say, the Dorati Berkey recordings around the same period. But the interpretation is so powerful that kind of makes up for it. It's really one of the great Rite of Springs on record. Incidentally, this Testament version issue has two recordings of the Rite from Markevich and the Philharmonia. One is from 1951, but I don't think you're missing anything by the later one. It's no less dramatic or powerful, and then you have the sound quality to boot. So, but hey, it's always good to have the more the merrier, I guess. So, now let's talk about this famous recording, the composer's own. First of all, very good sound quality, 1960. So we're blessed to have that. And this is with the Columbia Symphony, which was a group kind of brought together of professional musicians for recording purposes. And Stravinsky, he may not have had the same gift for the dramatic that someone like, say, a Bernstein or Monteux had. But obviously it's his works, so there's obvious value in hearing how he wanted it interpreted. And what really comes across is the starkness of it. It's a really no nonsense interpretation, especially of the Rite of Spring. It's kind of more terrifying in a way, like I was saying about the Boulez, that he's just giving you the facts. It's not quite as powerful as, like, say, Dorati, or overwhelming, but in its sort of discipline, which obviously, hearing that come from the composer himself is something that's very powerful in and of itself. It's a very powerful interpretation, legendary for good reason, and one that you definitely want to hear if you love these works. Finally, I want to mention personal favorite of mine, and many others as well, despite the really old sound quality, and that is this one, Leopold Stokowski, the grand showman, and his amazingly virtuosic Philadelphia Orchestra. The Rite of Spring is from 1929. Petrushka is from 1937. They both sound actually pretty good. This is the RCA issue. I think there's like maybe Pearl issued them as well. We're going to come to there's a Dutton transfer of the Petrushka, which is really good. Stokowski just, he had that element of spontaneity and confidence and showmanship, and that Philadelphia Orchestra, it just felt like, a virtuoso on his violin who could do whatever he wanted. And it's just real dramatic and powerful. And for me, I forget the sound quality after a while. It is very dim, of course, but compared to modern recordings, but good enough to where the power of the interpretations still come across. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, I hope you'll also take time to click the like and subscribe buttons. And with that, I want to wish you all a great day and happy listening.